Hi, everyone. It's Sarah Stewart with Solid Serenity Legal Solutions, and this is Legal Scope, where we tell you the law in a way that everyone can understand. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, and I watched this trial pretty much all of it, and I watched it with other panels of attorneys who were giving legal analysis. And what came up recently that I wanted to address is a Washington Post ed. I've seen it other places, but that's the place I saw it first, that talked about a tactic called DARVO and how DARVO supposedly helped Johnny Depp win this lawsuit. So I have some problems with that, as having witnessed all of the testimony and everything that took place myself. So if you don't know, DARVO is a tactic that abusers use. It's called deny, attack, reverse, victim, offender. So that's what DARVO stands for, if you ever hear that. Basically, the concept is, I didn't do anything, but if I did, it wasn't that bad. Or that didn't happen, but if it did, it wasn't that bad. Or, no, I didn't do that. That person did that. The other person who's accusing me. So there's this idea out there that there needs to be a power dynamic for DARVO to take place, right? So these articles express that because Johnny Depp was the more famous actor, he made more money, he had to have power over Amber Heard. But that's not the only type of power you can have, right? And back when these accusations started, it was when they separated, right? And we have recordings in the trial that Johnny Depp actually said to Amber Heard first that he was a victim of abuse. So the reason that's important is because DARVO can come into play whenever survivors confront their abuser. So that wasn't long before they separated. So what came out in the trial, even though it was kind of piecemeal, you had to kind of piece it together, is that they separated in 2017. But less than a month before the separation, Johnny Depp lost a lot of money. He lost almost everything he owned in liquid assets. So it's interesting that the separation and Amber Heard filing for divorce happened pretty soon after that. And when she filed for divorce is when she made the accusations of domestic abuse that continued to grow over time. So really the people that are considered to be likely candidates to experience this tactic, this DARVO tactic, are, like we said, survivors who confront their abusers and whistleblowers, someone who comes out and calls somebody out for who they really are. And it tends to be socially vulnerable groups. So if a woman or a minority or someone of that nature comes out with this tactic, then, against this tactic, it's more likely that they're the ones who are going to experience it and be the victims of it, just by statistics alone, right? But that does not mean that it never happens the other way around. So the reason that people use DARVO are for several reasons. First, they can use it as a smokescreen to conceal what they did. So to conceal the abuse, to conceal the mistreatment that they actually did in the relationship. And it also stuns the targeted person. So it often stuns them into silence and confusion. But what's interesting about DARVO, which I think we also saw play out in a similar way throughout the case, and this idea of what's abuse, what's reactive abuse, because it's been proven that abuse is something that you do intentionally. They intentionally control this person. They intentionally manipulate them. But over time, we've found that victims of abuse can do what's called reactive abuse. So this is actually a survival tactic. And this is your fight, flight, fawn, or freeze response, if you've ever heard of that. So often what we see in victims is they try to retreat, but when that doesn't work, they fight back. And over time, they become conditioned to fight back. So I think this played out in the trial, and we saw some pretty mean texts from Johnny Depp about Amber Heard calling her names to his friends. There were also some recordings where she had him yelling at the top of his lungs, calling her names. But we have recordings where she admits to hitting him. We have recordings where she calls him names and belittles him on a deeper level. It's not just, saying you're calling them a name, but actually going deeper and calling them a has-been and talking about how horrible of a person they are. This is recorded. There was evidence that she didn't have bruises that she claimed she had. There was evidence that she had altered photos. There was evidence that her testimony contradicted her own witnesses' testimony. So it's hard in domestic violence situations to understand who the abuser and the reactive abuser is. But in this case, there were so many eyewitnesses for Depp that were not connected to him in some way, like independent police officers that collaborated or corroborated, corroborated is the correct word, what he said, that it lends much more likelihood to his version being the truth. So in DARVO, the counterattack can look very similar. Just like we have the abuser and we have the reactive abuser, we have someone who starts the STARVO tactic, who's the actual abuser saying the other person is the abuser. And then the counter looks really similar to DARVO. So it's easy to confuse the two. So the counter to DARVO is to fight back, to spot and understand DARVO, because studies show that that reduces its effectiveness. It can be a form of gaslighting, right? So they can actually convince the person who was the victim that they did abuse by gaslighting them and changing facts on them and trying to make them think that they did something wrong or that they're a monster, as we saw in the Johnny Depp case. They also, another counter is to actively protect your character and to actively attack the perpetrator's character. So you can see how the two tactics, the DARVO tactic and just the counter and the way to fight back against that tactic, are very similar and can be confusing if you're not looking at all the facts. So just to remind everybody why I came to the conclusion that I came to, which was similar to the jury, there was just so much evidence against Amber Heard. I went into this wanting to believe her. I do believe that that should believe and investigate should be the way that we look at things, right? Initially agree that they're probably going through abuse and then find the evidence that supports that. Understanding that in these situations, evidence can be minimal. It can be hard to get evidence, which is what makes the situation difficult. But in Amber Heard's case, she had evidence. She had pictures of bruising that after she said there was an incident where she had black eyes and a broken nose, but it was just a little bruise right here. She indicated it was from a really hard headbutt. Well, Johnny Depp stated, yes, we had a headbutt, but I was restraining her because she was hitting me. And so it was a light headbutt. There may have been some light bruising, which was consistent with the evidence she brought to court, as well as the witness she had that saw the bruising, who was a makeup artist and specifically said that it looked like a light headbutt would have caused those bruises. There's also the stairwell incident where Amber Heard claims that she was protecting her sister. From her testimony, it was Johnny Depp was in front of them and trying to hit her sister and would have knocked her down the stairs. And so she stepped in between and started hitting him. Her sister's testimony claimed that he pushed her from the back and came in and started hitting Amber Heard because Amber Heard had hit him. So it's not even consistent testimony. And there are some questions about the dynamic for Whitney Heard and Amber Heard. That didn't come into the case, so I'm not going to talk about it in detail, though if you look outside of the case, there's evidence about their relationship. There was also this alleged sexual assault at the trailer park, supposedly with a bottle. I mean, it was pretty gruesome testimony that she gave. She claims that Johnny Depp got angry with her because she was sitting with a girl and that he was jealous. And so he came over and threatened to break this girl's wrist. However, nobody else saw him touch this woman. Nobody else saw him talk to this woman. Other than, I believe there might have been one witness who said that from a distance, he said, "Don't touch my girl," or something like that. But Amber Heard never brought this person as a witness to testify that he had tried to break her wrist or threatened to break her wrist. So there was yet another inconsistency in her statement. Plus, she claimed that after this, they went back to the mobile home and there was this huge fight with the sexual assault and everything was broken and there was glass everywhere and there were wine stains everywhere. But Johnny Depp was able to bring a trailer park manager who came the next morning and only had to fix a light fixture. He did not see any staining. He did not see any indication of a struggle of any kind. So again, just another inconsistency that makes you question Amber Heard. She also claimed that Johnny Depp cut off his own finger. And it was interesting because at first she said that he had gotten angry in Australia and took a wall phone and started hitting it and broke it. And she thinks that's how he cut it off. But whenever she came back to testify for rebuttal and was cross-examined, she denied ever saying that he had cut off his finger with the phone. And Johnny Depp's experts were able to verify that it would be very unlikely to get that type of injury by breaking a phone. However, that injury was consistent with Depp's statements that she had thrown a wine bottle at him. It had hit his finger in just the right way as it was leaning up against a counter to basically cut off part of his finger and sever it. So again, just another inconsistency. There were two experts on Depp's side that testified to this. Also, there were police who were called to an incident not long before the separation where I believe it was a friend in New York who was a friend of Amber Heard called the police because he was under the impression that Amber Heard was in danger, that Johnny Depp was angry, he was throwing things. So the police came, they questioned everybody in the house. They saw no evidence of a struggle. There's body cam footage that is consistent with there being no evidence. Of course, Amber Heard claims there were stains on the floor, there were stains on the wall, wine had been thrown around, glass was broken. But you can see clearly from the body cam footage that that was not the scene when the police arrived. There were two officers on the first call, both testified to basically the same facts, that they did not write a report because they did not feel there was a domestic violence incident. The husband wasn't on the scene. The wife refused to speak to anybody. They were just talking to some bystanders. There was another, it's unclear if it was another call or they said sometimes there can be a delay. If there had been more than one call to try to get to them at the beginning, sometimes that can be delayed a bit. And so about 10 minutes later, another officer was called out to the scene. And again, they're not sure if it was a separate call or if it was related to the first, and that this officer saw basically the same thing. Again, body cam footage of no stains, body cam footage of no broken glass. These people have no reason to support Johnny Depp, and in fact did not know this was Johnny Depp and Amber Heard at the time that this incident took place. So it calls into question her testimony and her tactics. Of course, we do have Depp's text to his friends saying some pretty horrible things about her, wishing her dead, wanting to kill her, calling her names, but that's as far as it went. There were some recordings where he called her names during a fight. There was a recording where she had him slamming cabinets in the kitchen. He did not walk toward her. He did not menacingly approach her. She kept kind of talking to him, asking him questions. And as she continued to ask him questions, you'd see him walk out and back into the scene and slam something after a question. And it was clear by her reaction at the end of it, a slight little smile when he got angry after realizing he was being recorded and took the phone and threw the phone. She picked up the phone and smiled. So it was clear she intended to have that video documentation. And there was also testimony that she was very likely the one who leaked it to TMZ, and that when she leaked it, she had edited it to cut out the beginning that shows where she sets up the phone and the end that shows her smile. There was a witness for Depp who said that he works for TMZ, he's worked there a long time, and that in order to get copyrights, which, to remind you, TMZ is run by an attorney. So even though there may be things you agree or don't agree with about TMZ, they're going to check legally that they're okay to release things. So he just mentioned that in his time there, he realized that if something came directly from a source, they could verify copyright very quickly and they could run it very quickly. When they had to find the source to get information, if it was an anonymous source, then it took a lot longer because they had to track down the copyright. So he indicated through this testimony that Amber Heard or someone in her team had released this to him, and the fact that it was edited to cut out some of the not so good parts for her also indicated that she somehow was related to the release of this to TMZ. So there's also an acting coach. This was very interesting testimony, who claims to have heard the argument at the trailer park, and she said they were loud and they were yelling, and she did recall coming over the next morning and seeing some disarray, like a mess, things on the floor, not to the extent that Amber had testified to. But she made a very interesting statement. She said that in her time working with Amber, she found that it was difficult for her to cry on command when she's acting. And that just, for me at least, and I would imagine the jury watching it as well, called up images of her testimony where she had this kind of underlying emotion, but there were no tears. There was sadness, but it just didn't look quite right. So that was very interesting testimony that called into question Amber's credibility. Amber Heard also called Ellen Barkin. So Ellen Barkin is an interesting character. I did a little research before she hit the stand, though I tried not to do that during this this whole trial, but I did that just because I didn't know why she'd be called. So there was apparently a rumor back when they dated in 1990 that Johnny Depp threw a bottle at her, and that somehow led to their dissolution of their relationship. But when she testified, she said they didn't have a relationship. They were just sexual partners, friends, basically. And that this incident that took place was in a hotel. And there'd been something going on with his band. She wasn't really sure. She wasn't sure what he was angry about, but that he did not, number one, throw the bottle. He tossed it. and that it wasn't at anybody. He had just kind of tossed it across the room. So it was unclear what that really meant. She didn't know why he had tossed it. She didn't know if he was tossing it to another person to catch for a drink. She just knew he was upset. He tossed a bottle. It was not toward anyone. So I don't think Amber Heard got what she was expecting from that testimony. Moreover, there was a claim that Johnny Depp had kicked Amber Heard on a plane in front of a lot of people, causing her to fall to the floor, have bruises on her back. But there was pictures from an award ceremony of some sort the next night with no bruises on her back. There was also testimony from other people on the plane that they did not see that they had seen Johnny Depp kind of playfully place his leg up and kind of knock her on the bottom, just playfully. She wasn't injured. She didn't fall forward. It was just kind of a light little flirtatious booty kick. So of course, again, that calls into question Amber Heard's testimony. And there's a lot. I mean, we can go into a lot more of this, but this is just the basics to help you understand who's using the DARVO tactic, who's the reactive abuser, who's the person who's actually the abuser in the relationship. And to give you some idea of what the jury saw, because it does seem like sometimes the mainstream media and these op-eds leave some of this stuff out or spin it, right, to make it different. Because there is a concern, of course, that there could be a chilling factor for victims of domestic violence, because this was such a highly publicized case. And because Amber Heard's testimony was called into such great question, that it just really did a disservice to survivors of domestic violence that this whole thing happened in the first place, to be honest. So it was interesting too that Amber Heard brought on this expert to say that she had been a victim of domestic violence. Of course, the expert only went off of Amber Heard's statements to her. She didn't meet with Johnny Depp. I believe she read some therapy notes, but again, these therapy notes were self-reporting. It was Amber Heard talking to a therapist and giving her story that way. And what was interesting about this particular expert is she was very gendered. She said that men can be abused, but only in homosexual relationships. So though I understand that the vast majority of victims of domestic violence are women, I believe it's 90%, there's still 10%, right? So that, I know it rubbed me wrong. And I believe that could possibly be the same reaction that a jury would have to that particular expert. There was another expert that testified about the potential authenticity of these photos, but could never actually authenticate them. So that didn't really bode well in her favor. And remember, these are her experts that she's paying to be on the stand. And of course, the Johnny Depp's expert put side by side two identical pictures that were supposed to have been separate incidents, or that's how Amber Heard had presented them to the court. He also put side by side two other pictures that she claimed were different pictures of the same, like of the same bruising. But one of them, you could tell clearly it was the exact same picture, but like the red had been turned up to make the bruising look worse. So he wasn't able, it was clear there were some evidentiary issues and some ruling that didn't allow him to go into some detail beyond that. But he was able to show that photos that she claimed were different were actually the same and had been altered. Whereas her expert, who was supposed to counter that, couldn't authenticate or counter that in any way. And Depp's psychologist also made it clear that there were some possible personality disorders for Amber Heard, histrionic personality disorder, and I believe it was, I can't remember the other one right off the top of my head, but 2 personality disorders that can cause her to react the way she has, be scared of abandonment. Pretty much everything she said lined up with what we saw from Amber Heard's testimony. And she actually met with Amber Heard, and she actually met with Johnny Depp, and she actually met with other people. And so it wasn't just taking into account Amber Heard's statements. It was a more well-rounded approach. There was a lot of testimony about drug use. It was clear that Amber Heard was trying to vilify Johnny Depp with drug use while also testifying that she rarely used drugs, though her own witnesses claim that she used them quite often. So that was hard to see. It's hard to really believe her and find her credible when her own witnesses' testimony conflicts. And just kind of some other things that I noticed. There was testimony about Johnny Depp allowing Amber Heard to bring in pretty much this whole gaggle of people to come live in his penthouses and be neighbors to them. And that's just not common abuser behavior. They tend to try to control the situation and isolate their victims. So that was really interesting to me. And they were all very clear that he was very welcoming with them until incidents happened. It sounds like there were some falling outs. And another interesting part is Amber Heard's witnesses are no longer in contact with her. And they all testified that they are no longer friends with her. However, Johnny Depp had many witnesses who had been friends with him for a long time. So just knowing about her personality disorders and her actions throughout the trial that he testified to, it makes sense. It, in my opinion, corroborates Johnny Depp's testimony about her. And just to be clear, that I've kind of seen some news reports where her attorney has come out and made all these claims that this is bad for women and that there was evidence that didn't get in. But there was this evidence that she's talking about, these medical records, right? They didn't come in because there was testimony throughout the whole case that these medical records that didn't come in were all self-reported. It was therapy notes from when Amber Heard went to a therapist. It wasn't a medical doctor. It wasn't a nurse. It wasn't a dentist when she said she was punched in the mouth and had a fat lip. These were just statements she had made to therapists that they wanted to get in to bolster their case. So that evidence that was presented at trial, the standard in a civil case is preponderance of evidence. So is it more likely true that Johnny Depp was defamed and he didn't physically or sexually assault Amber Heard? Or is it more likely true that she is telling the truth? My personal opinion is that the jury got it right. But of course, if you haven't seen the whole trial, that's a conclusion you'll have to come to on your own. Keeping in mind, there's been a lot of talk about mutual abuse. There's been a lot of talk about the DARVO tactic, but keeping in mind that I don't believe in mutual abuse as domestic violence advocate, an attorney. Also, I come from a public relations perspective, so I can see the damage control taking place. But mutual abuse isn't a thing. There is an abuser and a reactive abuser. So there may be 2 people who unfortunately go to aggression, but there's one party who has power and control in a domestic violence situation. And power and control doesn't necessarily mean they make more money. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have more fame. the power and control can come from all sorts of different dynamics. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. Just because someone might be in a better financial situation doesn't mean that they're the ones trying to control the other person. It is a means of control. You can financially control someone, but it's not the only way. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is we're seeing an abuser and a reactive abuser. I'll let you determine who you think that is. I believe it was Johnny Depp. There's also someone who is using DARVO tactics, and there's someone who's using the counters that look almost exactly like DARVO. So again, given the evidence, I personally believe that Johnny Depp is countering DARVO. I'll let you decide that. But just keep in mind that these things aren't as black and white as they seem. Men can be abused. Women absolutely can be abused. I went into this 100% wanting to be on Amber Heard's side. As an advocate of domestic violence, I wanted to believe everything she said. Unfortunately, there was a lot of evidence not submitted by her and submitted by her that contradicted what she said. And it made it really hard to believe what she said. And so each case, I believe, needs a very deep analysis. We need to look at all the facts and all the evidence presented, and not just look at the dynamics between, oh, he's a wealthy man who was super famous. Well, yeah, but not when she made the claims against him. He had just lost all his money. And he, after she made the claims against him, lost all of his career opportunities. And there was evidence that showed that as well. And even though I think we on an instinctual basis know that's true. So there's all sorts of power dynamics at play. We can't just look at finances and fame. So that is my analysis for you of who is actually committing abuse, who actually used the DARVO tactic in the Heard Depp case. I hope that you'll take some time to evaluate these things for yourself. And not just listen to the media. I did notice, just one last note before I get off of here, I did notice in the media that they said defamation, and when I say media, I mean mainstream, that they said both parties had defamation found in their favor, and that's kind of accurate. So Johnny Depp, it was found that Amber Heard had defamed him on all counts. He was awarded compensatory, which means for the damages that he suffered, damages, and punitive damages. So that means that's in law, that means that that is a type of damage that is only awarded if someone's done something really bad and really wrong. So they found that Amber Heard had done that. In the reverse, Amber Heard's defamation, they only found for 1 point. So she had several different ones. I think I want to say maybe 4 counts, 3 or 4 counts. You can see the full verdict whenever you look up on YouTube. I don't know that they're playing it on the mainstream media. What I found was very cut, very edited. But what they showed in court, you can find some of that stream. But for her defamation, it was one very specific phrase that Adam Waldman had posted on Instagram. And this phrase went into detail, right? Like her and her friends broke wine glasses and they poured wine on the floor to stage stains, and they called the police twice, making these claims. And it was just very detailed. In my personal opinion, based on what I saw, and they did a great job of evaluating that. She got a very small amount compared to what Johnny did. But one thing that stuck out to me is the specificness of it, right? So in the trial, it was unclear if they called the police twice or if it was just a follow-up to the first call. So that in and of itself could arguably have been defamatory against her, even if everything else in that statement were true, right? So I really think the jury did a great job in this case. And I really hope that if you're interested in this, that you'll go back and look at things through this lens of the dynamics and the complications of domestic violence relationships. And I really hope they both move on. It looks like Johnny Depp kind of seems to just be going on with his life, not addressing anything. But Amber Heard seems to be popping up in the media a lot, which is interesting. That also indicates to me that the jury got it right, because people with these types of personality disorders generally don't let things go. So I just wanted to hop on here and give you my perspective. It was something that was kind of eating at me last week, to see these stories that just didn't seem accurate to me. So again, this is Sarah Stewart with Solid Serenity Legal, and this is Legal Zone or Legal Scope. And I hope that I made the law a little bit more understandable for you today. That's my goal. And I will not be talking about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard anymore. We'll be moving on. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope that I will see you soon. Bye.